Question 1. System analysis indicates a financial services organization is migrating a significant portion of its customer data processing to a public cloud provider, while maintaining some critical legacy systems on premises. The organization must ensure that sensitive customer financial information remains protected from unauthorized access and complies with stringent data privacy regulations. The network architecture must facilitate secure data exchange between the on-premises environment and the cloud, and protect data stored in both locations. Which of the following implementation approaches best addresses these requirements from a security and regulatory compliance perspective? Option A. Implement end-to-end encryption for data in transit between on-premises and cloud environments, and encrypt data at rest in both the on-premises data center and the public cloud using strong, industry-standard algorithms. Option B. Implement encryption solely for data residing within the on-premises data center, with data transmitted to and stored in the public cloud remaining unencrypted. Option C. Rely exclusively on network-level firewalls and access control lists to secure the data, without implementing any specific data encryption mechanisms for data in transit or at rest. Option D. Encrypt data only when it is in transit between the on-premises data center and the public cloud, assuming that data at rest within the cloud provider's infrastructure is adequately secured by the provider. The correct answer is A. Implement end-to-end encryption for data in transit between on-premises and cloud environments, and encrypt data at rest in both the on-premises data center and the public cloud using strong, industry-standard algorithms. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in network design, ensuring secure and compliant data transmission across a hybrid cloud environment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security, adherence to data privacy regulations, and the operational requirements of a modern enterprise. The complexity is amplified by the distributed nature of the data and the varying security postures of on-premises and cloud infrastructure. Professionals must navigate the intricacies of encryption, access control, and regulatory compliance without compromising network performance or business continuity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing a comprehensive, end-to-end encryption strategy that encompasses data both in transit and at rest across all environments. This includes utilizing strong, industry-standard encryption protocols for data moving between on-premises data centers and the public cloud, e.g., TLS-1, 3 for transit, and employing robust encryption mechanisms for data stored in both locations, e.g., AES-256 for data at rest. This strategy directly addresses the core requirement of protecting sensitive data from unauthorized access, which is a fundamental tenet of data privacy regulations. By ensuring encryption is applied consistently, regardless of data location, it aligns with the principle of data minimization and protection, reducing the attack surface and mitigating risks associated with data breaches. This proactive security posture is essential for maintaining customer trust and avoiding significant regulatory penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing encryption only for data in transit between on-premises and cloud environments, but not for data at rest in the cloud, creates a significant security vulnerability. Data at rest is susceptible to unauthorized access if the cloud storage is compromised or if internal threats exist. This failure to protect data in all states directly contravenes data protection principles mandated by regulations, which require comprehensive security measures. Encrypting data only within the on-premises environment and leaving data in the public cloud unencrypted is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. This approach assumes the cloud provider's security is sufficient, which is often not the case for sensitive enterprise data. It violates the principle of shared responsibility in cloud security and exposes the organization to severe data breach risks and noncompliance with data residency and privacy laws. Relying solely on network-level firewalls and access control lists without implementing data encryption is insufficient for protecting sensitive information. While these measures are important for network segmentation and access management, they do not protect data if the network perimeter is breached or if authorized users misuse their access. This approach fails to meet the security by design principle and leaves data exposed, leading to potential regulatory violations and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing the protection of sensitive data throughout its lifecycle. This involves understanding the data's classification, its regulatory requirements, and the potential impact of a breach. A layered security strategy, incorporating encryption at multiple points, is crucial. When designing network architectures for hybrid environments, professionals must consider the entire data path and storage locations, ensuring consistent security controls are applied. Regulatory frameworks often mandate specific security measures, and adherence to these is paramount. Decision-making should be guided by principles of data privacy, security best practices, and a thorough understanding of the organization's threat landscape and compliance obligations. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates intermittent packet loss and increased latency on the primary network path, serving a critical real-time financial data feed, leading to occasional breaches of the agreed-upon service level agreement, SLA, for data delivery timeliness. The architecture currently relies on a single high-bandwidth link without advanced traffic prioritization mechanisms. What is the most appropriate and professionally responsible approach to address this implementation challenge? Option A. Implement quality of service, (QoS), mechanisms including traffic shaping and policing for the financial data feed, establish redundant network paths with fast failover, and enhance proactive monitoring and alerting for early issue detection. Option B. Increase the bandwidth of the existing primary network link to accommodate potential traffic spikes and assume this will resolve the performance issues. Option C. Deploy a less sophisticated traffic prioritization method and rely on manual intervention for troubleshooting when performance issues are reported. Option D. Acknowledge the intermittent nature of the problem and wait for a more significant or prolonged failure before initiating any design changes. Correct answer is A. Implement quality of service, (QoS) mechanisms including traffic shaping and policing for the financial data feed, establish redundant network paths with fast failover, and enhance proactive monitoring and alerting for early issue detection. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common but challenging implementation hurdle in network design, ensuring that a critical service, in this case, a real-time financial data feed, meets stringent service level agreement, SLA, requirements under fluctuating network conditions. The challenge lies in balancing performance, reliability, and cost while adhering to regulatory mandates for financial data integrity and availability. The professional must not only understand the technical aspects of network design, but also the implications of regulatory compliance on design choices. The pressure to maintain continuous service for financial operations, coupled with the potential for significant financial losses or regulatory penalties due to downtime or data corruption, makes this a high-stakes situation demanding careful, evidence-based decision-making. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that directly addresses the observed performance degradation and the underlying causes. Implementing quality of service, (QoS) mechanisms, specifically traffic shaping and policing for the financial data feed, ensures that this critical traffic receives preferential treatment and adheres to defined bandwidth limits, preventing congestion from impacting its performance. Simultaneously, establishing redundant network paths with fast failover capabilities mitigates the risk of single points of failure and ensures service continuity. Proactive monitoring and alerting, coupled with a well-defined incident response plan, are crucial for rapid detection and resolution of issues, minimizing downtime. This comprehensive approach aligns with the principles of robust network architecture design, emphasizing resilience, performance optimization, and adherence to service commitments, which are implicitly or explicitly required by financial sector regulations concerning data integrity and availability. For instance, in the U.S., regulations like those from the SEC and FINRA mandate that financial firms have robust systems in place to ensure the integrity and availability of trading data and related services. A design that prioritizes these aspects through technical controls and redundancy is therefore best professional practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. Simply increasing the bandwidth of the existing link without addressing traffic prioritization or redundancy is an incomplete solution. While it might temporarily alleviate congestion, it fails to guarantee performance for the critical financial data feed if other traffic types consume the increased bandwidth. This approach also ignores the potential for single points of failure, which is a significant regulatory concern in financial services. It represents a reactive, rather than proactive, solution. Implementing a less sophisticated traffic management technique, such as basic prioritization without shaping or policing, might not be sufficient to prevent bursts of lower priority traffic from overwhelming the financial data. This could lead to packet loss or increased latency, violating SLA terms and potentially contravening regulatory requirements for data accuracy and timeliness. Furthermore, relying solely on manual intervention for troubleshooting is inefficient and prone to human error, increasing the risk of prolonged outages and regulatory noncompliance. Ignoring the observed performance degradation and assuming it will resolve itself is professionally negligent and carries significant regulatory risk. Financial data integrity and availability are paramount, and any deviation from expected performance must be investigated and addressed. This passive approach directly violates the duty of care and the implicit or explicit regulatory obligations to maintain reliable financial systems. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such implementation challenges by first thoroughly analyzing the observed symptoms and correlating them with potential root causes. This involves leveraging monitoring data to understand traffic patterns, resource utilization, and error rates. The next step is to identify potential solutions that address these root causes while considering the specific requirements of the application, e.g., real-time financial data and any relevant regulatory or compliance obligations. A structured approach involves evaluating solutions based on their effectiveness in meeting performance targets, ensuring resilience, and minimizing operational risk. This often leads to a layered strategy incorporating co-s, redundancy, and robust monitoring. Professionals should always prioritize solutions that demonstrate a proactive and comprehensive approach to service assurance, rather than quick fixes that do not address underlying issues or potential future problems. The decision-making process must be informed by an understanding of the business impact of service disruption and the legal/regulatory consequences of non-compliance. Question 3. Regulatory review indicates that a new customer-facing service is scheduled for rapid deployment, and the network architecture design must ensure compliance with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. The design team is considering several approaches to meet the aggressive timeline while addressing data privacy concerns. Which approach best aligns with GDPR principles and professional best practices for network architecture design under such constraints? Option A. Prioritize rapid deployment by collecting all available user data to facilitate future service enhancements, deferring detailed security and privacy reviews until after the initial launch. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) early in the design phase. Implement network segmentation with strict access controls to enforce data minimization, and ensure end-to-end encryption for all data in transit and at rest. Option C. Proceed with the deployment using only basic perimeter firewall security, assuming that the service's limited scope will not trigger significant GDPR scrutiny. Option D. Implement the network architecture with minimal security controls, focusing on functionality, and plan to address any potential GDPR compliance issues reactively if they arise. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, early in the design phase. Implement network segmentation with strict access controls to enforce data minimization, and ensure end-to-end encryption for all data in transit and at rest. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the inherent tension between rapid network deployment and the imperative of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security as mandated by the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. The urgency to launch a new service, driven by market competition, can lead to shortcuts in design and implementation that inadvertently expose sensitive user data or violate data processing principles. Architects must balance business objectives with legal obligations, requiring a nuanced understanding of both technical capabilities and regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in ensuring that the network architecture, even under pressure, adheres to principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and robust security measures, all of which are central to GDPR compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy where regulatory compliance, particularly GDPR, is embedded into the network design lifecycle from its inception. This means conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) early in the design phase to identify and mitigate potential risks to personal data. It also entails designing network segments and access controls that enforce data minimization, ensuring only necessary data is processed and stored. Furthermore, implementing robust encryption for data in transit and at rest, along with comprehensive logging and auditing mechanisms, directly addresses GDPR requirements for data security and accountability. This approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the GDPR principles of privacy by design and privacy by default, demonstrating a commitment to lawful and ethical data handling. It preempts potential breaches and regulatory penalties by building compliance into the foundational architecture, thereby safeguarding both the organization and its users. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing network changes without a formal DPIA is a significant regulatory failure under GDPR. Article 35 mandates a DPIA for processing likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons. Failing to conduct one means potential risks to personal data are not identified or mitigated, leading to noncompliance and potential fines. This approach also violates the ethical principle of due diligence in protecting user data. Deploying the service with minimal security controls, relying solely on perimeter firewalls, represents a failure to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures as required by GDPR Article 32. This approach neglects the need for layered security, data encryption, and access management, increasing the likelihood of unauthorized access or data breaches. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the responsibility to protect sensitive information. Designing the network to collect and retain all user data indefinitely, even if not immediately required for the service, directly contravenes GDPR data minimization and storage limitation principles, Articles 5(1)(c) and 5(1)(e). This creates an unnecessary risk profile, as more data collected means more potential for breaches and greater impact if a breach occurs. It also fails to respect user rights regarding data retention. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing regulatory compliance as a foundational element of network architecture design. This involves a continuous cycle of assessment, design, implementation, and monitoring, with specific attention to data protection regulations like GDPR. When faced with time pressures, the decision-making process should involve escalating concerns about potential noncompliance to stakeholders, advocating for the necessary time and resources to conduct thorough assessments and implement compliant solutions. The framework should prioritize privacy by design, ensuring that data protection considerations are integral to every architectural decision, rather than an afterthought. This proactive stance minimizes legal exposure and builds trust with users. Question 4. Benchmark analysis indicates that a financial services organization operating within the United States requires a network service architecture for transmitting sensitive customer financial data. The architecture must adhere to the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and relevant Federal Trade Commission, FTC, guidelines for data security and privacy. The design must incorporate encryption to protect data in transit, but the organization has expressed concerns about potential latency increases impacting real-time trading applications. Which design approach best balances regulatory compliance with performance requirements? Option A. Utilize a proprietary encryption algorithm developed in-house, prioritizing maximum computational complexity to ensure the highest level of data confidentiality, without external validation of its compliance with GLBA or performance impact. Option B. Implement strong, industry-standard encryption protocols such as TLS1-3 with robust cipher suites, ensuring proper key management practices are in place, and conduct thorough performance testing to validate acceptable latency levels for critical trading applications. Option C. Employ basic, widely compatible encryption methods like older versions of SSL, focusing on minimal processing overhead to guarantee low latency, and assume this meets GLBA requirements due to its common usage. Option D. Deploy a network architecture that relies solely on physical security measures and access controls, omitting encryption for data in transit to eliminate any potential latency concerns, and assume GLBA compliance is met through these other controls. The correct answer is B. Implement strong, industry-standard encryption protocols such as TLS1-3 with robust cipher suites, ensuring proper key management practices are in place, and conduct thorough performance testing to validate acceptable latency levels for critical trading applications. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge in designing a network service architecture that balances performance requirements with the need for robust security and compliance, particularly concerning data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in selecting an appropriate encryption method that meets the stringent requirements of the specified jurisdiction without unduly impacting network latency or operational complexity. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of available encryption technologies against the specific mandates of the chosen regulatory framework. This includes understanding the approved algorithms, key management requirements, and performance implications. Selecting an encryption method that is both compliant and performant demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing both security and user experience, thereby upholding the organization's commitment to regulatory adherence and service quality. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive data and maintain the integrity of network services. An incorrect approach might involve choosing an encryption method based solely on its perceived strength, without verifying its compliance with the specific jurisdiction's regulations. This could lead to a violation of data privacy laws, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach could be to prioritize performance over security, opting for weaker encryption or inadequate key management practices. This would be a direct ethical failure, as it compromises the confidentiality and integrity of the data being transmitted, violating the trust placed in the network architect to secure sensitive information. Furthermore, implementing a solution that is overly complex or resource-intensive without a clear justification based on regulatory needs or demonstrable performance benefits would be professionally unsound, leading to increased operational costs and potential instability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable laws and guidelines relevant to data handling and network security within the specified jurisdiction. Next, they must translate these regulatory requirements into technical specifications for the network architecture, including encryption standards. A comparative analysis of potential solutions should then be conducted, evaluating each against these technical specifications, performance metrics, and operational feasibility. Finally, a risk assessment should be performed to identify potential vulnerabilities and ensure the chosen solution mitigates them effectively, all while maintaining a clear audit trail of the decision-making process. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a critical financial reporting application is experiencing unacceptable delays, impacting month-end closing procedures. Network monitoring shows intermittent spikes in latency affecting the application servers. What is the most appropriate initial design approach to address this implementation challenge? Option A. Immediately implement a broad quality of service (QoS) policy across the core network to prioritize all application traffic, assuming congestion is the primary cause. Option B. Increase the bandwidth of all network links connected to the application servers by 50% to proactively mitigate potential congestion. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive network performance analysis, including traffic pattern examination, packet capture, and application-level diagnostics to pinpoint the exact source of latency before proposing any architectural changes. Option D. Deploy a new, higher-capacity firewall and switch infrastructure to the affected network segment, anticipating that increased throughput will resolve the latency. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive network performance analysis, including traffic pattern examination, packet capture, and application-level diagnostics, to pinpoint the exact source of latency before proposing any architectural changes. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network architecture design, where a critical business application's performance is suffering due to network latency. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for resolution with the long-term implications of design choices, particularly concerning the potential impact on other services and the adherence to established architectural principles. Stakeholder pressure for a quick fix can lead to hasty decisions that might not be sustainable or compliant with the organization's overall IT strategy and regulatory obligations. The need for deep analysis of the root cause, rather than just symptom treatment, is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation to identify the precise cause of latency. This includes leveraging network monitoring tools to gather real-time and historical performance data, analyzing traffic patterns, and examining the application's behavior within the network. This methodical approach ensures that the solution addresses the actual problem, not just its manifestations. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this aligns with principles of due diligence and responsible IT management. For instance, in a regulated industry, failure to properly diagnose and resolve performance issues impacting critical applications could lead to noncompliance with service-level agreements, SLAs, or even regulatory mandates concerning data availability and processing times. This approach prioritizes the integrity and reliability of the network, which are foundational to business operations and any applicable compliance frameworks. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a broad quality of service, QoS policy without a clear understanding of the application's specific needs or the network's current state is an incorrect approach. This could lead to unintended consequences, such as inadvertently degrading performance for other essential services or failing to resolve the original latency issue if it stems from a different cause, e.g., server overload application bug. Ethically, this represents a failure of due diligence, as it involves making significant network changes without adequate justification or testing, potentially impacting other users and business functions. Deploying a new, unproven network hardware solution without thorough testing and validation is also an incorrect approach. This introduces significant risk, including potential instability, compatibility issues, and security vulnerabilities. From a regulatory perspective, introducing untested infrastructure could violate compliance requirements related to system integrity and security, especially if the application handles sensitive data. It also fails to meet the professional standard of ensuring solutions are robust and reliable before deployment. Simply increasing bandwidth across the entire network without identifying specific bottlenecks is a superficial fix. While more bandwidth can sometimes alleviate congestion, it doesn't address underlying architectural inefficiencies or application-specific issues that might be causing latency. This approach is akin to treating a symptom rather than the disease. It is professionally unsound because it expends resources without a targeted solution and could mask more fundamental problems, leading to recurring issues and potential noncompliance with performance-related SLAs or regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured problem-solving methodology. This begins with clearly defining the problem and its impact, followed by data collection and analysis to identify the root cause. Solutions should then be designed based on this analysis, considering scalability, security, and compliance. Before implementation, thorough testing and validation are crucial. Post-implementation monitoring ensures the solution is effective and doesn't introduce new issues. This iterative, data-driven process, grounded in professional ethics and regulatory awareness, ensures robust and compliant network architectures. Question 6. Implementation of a new customer relationship management (CRM) system for a multinational corporation requires the architect to design the underlying network infrastructure. The client has expressed a strong desire for rapid deployment to gain a competitive advantage and has indicated that detailed data classification and security audits might slow down the process. The architect is aware that the CRM will handle sensitive customer data from various regions, including the European Union. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional ethical standards and regulatory compliance for designing this network infrastructure? Option A. Design and implement the network infrastructure with robust encryption and access controls, incorporating a phased approach to data classification and security audits post-deployment, while clearly documenting the risks associated with this phased approach to the client. Option B. Implement the network infrastructure based on the client's stated preference for speed, focusing solely on performance and connectivity, and inform the client that any security or compliance issues that arise post-deployment will be addressed as separate change requests. Option C. Design and implement the network infrastructure with comprehensive data classification, thorough security audits, and privacy by design principles integrated from the outset, even if it means a slightly longer deployment timeline, and clearly communicate the necessity of these steps to the client. Option D. Prioritize rapid deployment by implementing a basic network infrastructure with minimal security controls, assuming that the CRM vendor will handle all data security aspects, and deferring detailed security audits until after the system is fully operational. The correct answer is A. Design and implement the network infrastructure with robust encryption and access controls, incorporating a phased approach to data classification and security audits post-deployment, while clearly documenting the risks associated with this phased approach to the client. Explanation. The scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in network architecture design, particularly concerning data privacy and compliance with regulations. The challenge lies in balancing the client's desire for immediate, cost-effective solutions with the architect's professional responsibility to ensure data security and adherence to legal frameworks. The architect must navigate potential conflicts of interest and the temptation to overlook critical security measures for expediency. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and a phased implementation that aligns with regulatory requirements, specifically the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. If the client operates within the European Union or handles data of EU citizens, this approach demonstrates professional integrity by ensuring that the design not only meets functional requirements, but also upholds legal and ethical obligations regarding data protection. It involves proactive identification of potential vulnerabilities and the integration of security controls from the outset, which is a cornerstone of responsible network architecture. An incorrect approach that bypasses necessary security audits or data classification steps fails to meet the due diligence expected of a network architect. This could lead to significant regulatory penalties under GDPR for data breaches or noncompliance with data processing principles. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing a solution without explicit client consent on data handling policies, violates principles of transparency and informed consent, also contravening GDPR. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on performance metrics without considering data privacy implications, ignores the fundamental ethical and legal responsibilities associated with handling sensitive information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the full scope of regulatory obligations relevant to the client's operations and data. This involves a comprehensive risk assessment, followed by the development of design options that explicitly address security and privacy concerns. Client consultation and clear communication regarding these aspects are paramount. When faced with conflicting priorities, the architect must advocate for the ethically and legally sound solution, even if it requires more time or resources, by clearly articulating the potential risks and consequences of non-compliance. Question 7. The audit findings indicate a significant security vulnerability in a critical network segment that is currently preventing the deployment of a new revenue-generating service. The business unit is pressuring the network architect to immediately implement a proposed workaround that bypasses a key security control to enable the service launch within the quarter. The architect is aware that this workaround deviates from the approved network architecture and has not undergone the standard security review process. What is the most appropriate course of action for the network architect? Option A. Advise the business unit that the workaround cannot be implemented due to architectural deviations and security concerns, and refuse to explore alternatives. Option B. Initiate a formal change request process, including a comprehensive risk assessment and security review of the proposed workaround, and present findings to stakeholders for a decision. Option C. Implement the workaround immediately to meet the business unit's deadline, as the potential revenue outweighs the immediate security risk. Option D. Implement the workaround and document it internally as a temporary measure, planning to address the architectural and security review at a later date. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal change request process, including a comprehensive risk assessment and security review of the proposed workaround, and present findings to stakeholders for a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from a conflict between immediate operational needs and long-term architectural integrity, compounded by potential regulatory noncompliance. The network architect is faced with pressure to implement a quick fix that deviates from established design principles and potentially violates security policies, which could have downstream implications for compliance and system stability. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the business request with the responsibility to uphold architectural standards and regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and a structured change management process. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing security, compliance, and long-term system health. By engaging stakeholders, documenting the proposed change, and seeking formal approval, the architect demonstrates adherence to established governance frameworks. This process ensures that any deviation from the standard architecture is consciously evaluated for its impact on security controls, data privacy, and overall system resilience, thereby upholding regulatory requirements and ethical obligations to maintain a secure and compliant network. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the change without proper documentation or approval represents a failure to adhere to established change management protocols, which are often mandated by regulatory frameworks for maintaining audit trails and ensuring accountability. This bypasses necessary security reviews, potentially introducing vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or system downtime, violating principles of due diligence and professional responsibility. Suggesting a workaround that circumvents security controls, even temporarily, is a direct ethical and regulatory failure. Security controls are often put in place to meet specific compliance mandates, e.g., data protection regulations. Circumventing them, even with good intentions, can lead to non-compliance, fines, and reputational damage. It also demonstrates a lack of commitment to the security posture of the organization. Ignoring the request and stating it cannot be done without offering alternatives is professionally unhelpful and can damage stakeholder relationships. While maintaining architectural integrity is crucial, a lack of collaborative problem-solving can lead to frustration and the perception of inflexibility. Ethically, professionals are expected to find solutions within the bounds of their responsibilities, which includes exploring feasible alternatives rather than outright refusal without justification or exploration. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the business requirement and its urgency. This should be followed by an assessment of the proposed solution against existing architectural standards, security policies, and regulatory requirements. If the proposed solution deviates, a formal risk assessment and change request process should be initiated. This involves documenting the proposed change, its potential impacts, and mitigation strategies. Engaging with relevant stakeholders, including security and compliance teams, is crucial for obtaining informed consent and ensuring that all regulatory and ethical considerations are addressed before implementation. If the proposed change cannot be accommodated, alternative solutions that meet both business needs and compliance requirements should be explored and proposed. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a network architect to evaluate a proposed network design that offers significant cost savings but introduces potential vulnerabilities in data encryption. Management is pushing for the cost-saving option, citing budget constraints. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the network architect? Option A. Advocate for a design that meets both performance and security requirements, even if it means a higher initial investment, and clearly articulate the risks associated with the cost-saving option. Option B. Implement the cost-saving design as requested by management to meet budget targets, assuming the vulnerabilities are minor and unlikely to be exploited. Option C. Accept the management's directive without further objection to maintain a good working relationship and avoid conflict. Option D. Propose a phased approach where the cost-saving design is implemented initially, with a commitment to address security vulnerabilities in a future upgrade. The correct answer is A. Advocate for a design that meets both performance and security requirements, even if it means a higher initial investment, and clearly articulate the risks associated with the cost-saving option. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and security, particularly when network design decisions have potential implications for sensitive information. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate cost-saving pressures from management with the long-term risks associated with compromising security best practices. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the proposed solution on data confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and to articulate these risks effectively to stakeholders who may not have a deep technical understanding. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity and security of the network and the data it carries, aligning with fundamental ethical principles and the implicit trust placed in network architects. by advocating for a solution that meets both performance and security requirements. Even if it incurs higher initial costs, the architect upholds their responsibility to protect the organization's assets and comply with relevant data protection regulations. This proactive stance prevents potential future breaches, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over security would represent a significant ethical failure. It would violate the principle of due care and diligence, potentially exposing the organization to data breaches, unauthorized access, and loss of sensitive information. This could lead to severe regulatory penalties under data protection laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if operating within the EU or similar legislation in other jurisdictions. Such a decision would also erode trust with clients and partners, leading to reputational damage and loss of business. Another incorrect approach, which involves passively accepting the management's directive without raising concerns, demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and ethical courage. This inaction can be interpreted as complicity in a decision that compromises security, leading to the same negative consequences as actively choosing the less secure option. It fails to uphold the architect's duty to advise and protect the organization from foreseeable risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, clearly articulating the potential security and compliance implications of different design choices. This includes quantifying, where possible, the potential impact of a security incident. The architect should then present these findings to management, offering alternative solutions that mitigate risks while still addressing business objectives. If management insists on a course of action that poses unacceptable risks, the architect has an ethical obligation to document their concerns and recommendations, and if necessary, escalate the issue through appropriate internal channels. This process ensures that decisions are informed by a comprehensive understanding of both technical and ethical considerations. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a high probability of a critical security vulnerability if the proposed network service is deployed without implementing the full suite of security controls mandated by the organization's compliance framework. However, the project sponsor is insistent on an immediate launch to meet a critical business deadline, suggesting a temporary bypass of some controls with a promise to implement them post-launch. As the network architect responsible for the design, what is the most ethically and professionally sound approach? Option A. Refuse to approve the deployment until all mandated security controls are implemented, and clearly document the risks and potential regulatory noncompliance associated with any deviation. Option B. Implement the deployment with the bypass controls, but omit any mention of the deviation in the project documentation to avoid unnecessary scrutiny. Option C. Implement a partial set of security controls that are quick to deploy, even if they do not fully meet the mandated requirements, to satisfy the sponsor's deadline. Option D. Proceed with the deployment as requested by the sponsor, relying on the risk matrix to justify the temporary bypass of controls, assuming the probability of exploitation is low. Correct answer is A. Refuse to approve the deployment until all mandated security controls are implemented, and clearly document the risks and potential regulatory noncompliance associated with any deviation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the conflict between immediate business needs and long-term architectural integrity, amplified by potential regulatory scrutiny. Pressure to deploy a solution quickly, even if it deviates from established best practices and security standards, creates an ethical dilemma for the network architect. The architect must balance the demands of stakeholders with their professional responsibility to design secure, scalable, and compliant network services. The risk matrix, while highlighting potential threats, doesn't absolve the architect of the duty to adhere to regulatory frameworks and ethical principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework and architectural principles, even if it causes short-term delays. This aligns with the principles of responsible design and professional ethics, which mandate that security and compliance are not compromised for expediency. In the context of designing network services, this means ensuring that any proposed solution meets the requirements of relevant regulations, e.g., data privacy laws, industry-specific compliance standards, and the organization's own architectural guidelines. This approach demonstrates foresight, mitigating future risks and potential regulatory penalties, and upholds the architect's professional integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves overriding established security protocols and architectural standards to meet the immediate deployment deadline. This is a direct violation of professional ethics and potentially regulatory requirements. Such a decision could lead to significant security vulnerabilities, data breaches, and subsequent regulatory fines or legal action. It demonstrates a failure to uphold the duty of care expected of a network architect. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the deployment without proper documentation of the deviation and its potential risks. This lack of transparency is ethically unsound and makes it impossible to track the impact of the decision. It also hinders future audits and compliance efforts, potentially leading to severe consequences if a security incident occurs and the deviation is discovered without prior acknowledgement. A third incorrect approach is to solely rely on the risk matrix to justify the deviation without considering the broader regulatory and ethical implications. While the risk matrix is a valuable tool, it is not a substitute for professional judgment and adherence to established compliance mandates. Ignoring the underlying regulatory framework in favor of a risk assessment that might be influenced by stakeholder pressure is a failure of professional responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must clearly identify the conflicting requirements and potential consequences. Second, they should consult relevant regulatory frameworks, organizational policies, and architectural best practices. Third, they should engage in open communication with stakeholders, clearly articulating the risks and benefits of different approaches, including the potential regulatory and ethical implications of any deviation. If a deviation is deemed absolutely necessary, it must be thoroughly documented, with a clear plan for remediation and a formal risk acceptance process involving appropriate management levels. The ultimate decision should always prioritize long-term security, compliance, and ethical conduct over short-term gains. Question 10. Investigation of a network design for a new client data management system for a U.S.-based investment bank reveals a critical security flaw that could allow unauthorized access to sensitive client financial information. The project is under significant time pressure to meet a market launch deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action for the network architect? Option A. Inform only the project manager, who can then decide whether to delay the launch or proceed with the current design. Option B. Immediately report the vulnerability to the project manager and the bank's Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, and Chief Compliance Officer, CCO, recommending a halt to deployment until the vulnerability is addressed. Option C. Implement a temporary workaround for the vulnerability and proceed with the design, with a plan to address it fully in a future update. Option D. Proceed with the design as planned, documenting the vulnerability and proposing a post-deployment patch, assuming the risk of exploitation is low. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the vulnerability to the project manager and the bank's Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, and Chief Compliance Officer, CCO, recommending a halt to deployment until the vulnerability is addressed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a network architect is tasked with designing a network infrastructure for a financial services firm. The architect discovers a potential security vulnerability during the design phase that could expose sensitive client data. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate cost and time pressures of the project against the paramount responsibility to protect client data and comply with stringent financial regulations. The architect must navigate potential conflicts between business objectives and ethical/regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the discovered vulnerability to the appropriate stakeholders, including the project manager and the firm's security and compliance officers. This demonstrates adherence to the principle of due diligence and proactive risk management, which are fundamental in financial services. It aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate robust security measures and data protection for financial institutions. By reporting the issue, the architect ensures that the vulnerability can be addressed before deployment, preventing potential data breaches and regulatory penalties. This upholds the architect's professional responsibility to design secure and compliant systems. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the design without disclosing the vulnerability, hoping it will not be exploited or can be fixed later. This is a direct violation of ethical principles and regulatory requirements. In the U.S., regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act (GLBA) and the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard (PCI DSS) impose strict obligations on financial institutions to protect customer data. Failing to disclose and address a known vulnerability constitutes negligence and could lead to severe legal repercussions, fines, and reputational damage for both the architect and the firm. Another incorrect approach is to inform only the project manager, who may be focused on project timelines and budget, without involving the security and compliance teams. While informing the project manager is a step, it is insufficient. The project manager may not have the authority or expertise to fully assess the risk or implement the necessary remediation. This bypasses the established governance and compliance channels, which are critical for ensuring regulatory adherence in the financial sector. It fails to leverage the specialized knowledge of security and compliance professionals, increasing the likelihood of an inadequate response. A third incorrect approach is to suggest a workaround that mitigates the immediate risk, but does not fully resolve the underlying vulnerability, and to document this workaround without a clear plan for permanent remediation. While workarounds can be temporary measures, relying on them without a commitment to a permanent fix is insufficient for regulatory compliance in a highly regulated industry like finance. It creates a false sense of security and leaves the system susceptible to future exploits. Regulatory bodies expect a comprehensive and permanent solution to identified security weaknesses. Professional reasoning. Professionals in network architecture, especially within regulated industries like financial services, must adopt a risk-based decision-making process. This involves identifying potential risks, assessing their impact and likelihood, and implementing appropriate controls. When a significant security vulnerability is discovered, the immediate priority is to protect sensitive data and ensure compliance. This requires transparent communication with relevant parties, adherence to established security protocols, and a commitment to resolving issues thoroughly. The architect's role extends beyond technical design to include ethical considerations and regulatory awareness. A framework that prioritizes security and compliance, involves appropriate escalation, and ensures thorough remediation is essential for maintaining professional integrity and safeguarding client interests. Question 11. What factors determine the ethical and regulatory acceptability of a network service design when a proposed solution offers significant cost savings but introduces potential security vulnerabilities and raises questions about compliance with data protection mandates? Option A. The vendor's stated security certifications and the projected short-term cost savings compared to alternative solutions. Option B. The opinion of senior management regarding the acceptable level of risk and the potential for future remediation efforts. Option C. The thoroughness of the security risk assessment and the explicit alignment of the design with applicable data protection regulations. Option D. The urgency of the project timeline and the perceived likelihood of a security incident occurring. The correct answer is C. The thoroughness of the security risk assessment and the explicit alignment of the design with applicable data protection regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in network design where a proposed solution, while technically sound and potentially cost-effective in the short term, carries significant long-term security risks and potential for regulatory noncompliance. The challenge lies in balancing immediate project goals, e.g., budget, timeline, with the overarching responsibility to design secure, resilient, and compliant network architectures. The pressure to deliver a functional network quickly can sometimes overshadow the critical need for thorough risk assessment and adherence to established security best practices and regulatory mandates. The architect must navigate conflicting priorities and potential stakeholder pressures, making a judgment call that prioritizes long-term integrity and compliance over expediency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing a comprehensive security risk assessment and ensuring compliance with relevant data protection regulations before finalizing the design. This aligns with the principles of responsible network architecture, emphasizing proactive security and adherence to legal frameworks. Specifically, in the context of designing network services, this means identifying potential vulnerabilities introduced by the proposed solution, evaluating the impact of these vulnerabilities on sensitive data, and ensuring that the design meets or exceeds the requirements of applicable regulations e.g. GDPR if dealing with EU citizen data, HIPAA if dealing with health information in the US, or relevant UK data protection laws if the jurisdiction is UK-based. A robust risk assessment will inform necessary mitigation strategies, potentially leading to design modifications or the adoption of more secure alternatives, even if they incur higher initial costs. This approach safeguards the organization from potential data breaches, reputational damage, and significant financial penalties associated with regulatory noncompliance. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical design principles and professional due diligence. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the design without a thorough security risk assessment and explicit confirmation of regulatory compliance is a significant ethical and professional failure. This approach prioritizes expediency over security and legality. It creates a high probability of future security incidents and regulatory violations, leading to severe consequences such as data breaches, loss of customer trust, substantial fines, and legal action. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the architect's professional responsibility to design secure and compliant systems. Accepting the vendor's assurance of security without independent verification is also an unacceptable approach. While vendors aim to provide secure products, their assurances are not a substitute for an independent, context-specific risk assessment. Relying solely on vendor claims can lead to overlooking unique vulnerabilities within the specific network environment or misinterpreting the scope of the vendor's security guarantees. This can result in a false sense of security and leave the network exposed to threats that the vendor's standard security measures do not address. Ethically, it represents a failure to exercise due diligence. Implementing the design with a vague plan to address security and compliance later is a dangerous and unprofessional practice. Postponing critical security and compliance considerations is a recipe for disaster. Security and compliance are not afterthoughts. They must be integral to the design process from inception. This approach demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of secure network architecture and a willingness to accept unacceptable levels of risk. It is ethically unsound as it knowingly exposes the organization to potential harm and regulatory penalties. Professional reasoning. Professionals in network architecture must adopt a risk-based and compliance-driven approach. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the business requirements and constraints. 2. Identifying all potential security risks and compliance obligations relevant to the proposed design and the data it will handle. 3. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to quantify the likelihood and impact of identified risks. 4. Evaluating design options against security and compliance requirements, considering trade-offs between cost, performance, security, and compliance. 5. Documenting all decisions, justifications, and mitigation strategies. 6. Seeking stakeholder buy-in for the chosen design, clearly articulating the rationale and any associated risks or costs. This systematic approach ensures that designs are not only functional but also secure, resilient, and legally compliant, upholding professional integrity and protecting the organization. Question 12. When evaluating process optimization for network service deployment, which strategy best balances the need for rapid service delivery with the imperative for operational stability and risk mitigation? Option A. Performing validation only after a service has been deployed to the production environment. Option B. Implementing manual testing exclusively in the final staging environment before production deployment. Option C. Bypassing all validation steps for any deployment deemed urgent to meet aggressive timelines. Option D. Integrating automated validation checks for functionality, performance, and security compliance directly into the continuous integration and continuous delivery (CI/CD) pipeline. The correct answer is D. Integrating automated validation checks for functionality, performance, and security compliance directly into the continuous integration and continuous delivery (CI/CD) pipeline. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network architecture design, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain operational stability and adhere to established change management processes. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass critical validation steps, potentially introducing unforeseen risks and impacting service availability. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing demands, ensuring that speed does not compromise security, reliability, or compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations governing service provision. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves integrating a robust, automated validation framework directly into the CI/CD pipeline. This represents best professional practice because it embeds quality assurance and risk mitigation at the earliest stages of the service lifecycle. By automating tests for functionality, performance, and security compliance, potential issues are identified and resolved before deployment, significantly reducing the likelihood of service disruption or security breaches. This proactive stance aligns with principles of operational excellence and risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly supported by industry best practices and regulatory expectations for service providers, ensuring a higher degree of service integrity and customer trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on manual testing post-deployment. This is professionally unacceptable as it introduces significant risk. Manual testing is prone to human error, is time-consuming, and delays the identification of critical issues, increasing the potential for widespread service impact. Ethically, it fails to uphold the responsibility to deliver reliable services. From a regulatory perspective, if the service is subject to uptime or performance guarantees, this approach significantly increases the risk of non-compliance and associated penalties. Another incorrect approach is to bypass all validation steps for urgent deployments. This is a direct violation of change management best practices and introduces unacceptable risk. It prioritizes speed over stability and security, potentially leading to catastrophic failures, data breaches, or service outages. This disregard for established processes can have severe ethical implications, particularly if customer data or critical infrastructure is affected. It also creates a precedent for future risky behavior, undermining the overall governance of network operations. A third incorrect approach is to implement validation only at the final staging environment, without earlier integration into the development lifecycle. While better than no validation, this still represents a suboptimal process. Issues found late in the cycle are more costly and time-consuming to fix, and the feedback loop to developers is longer, hindering iterative improvement. This approach increases the risk of last-minute delays and rushed fixes, which can introduce new problems. It fails to fully leverage the benefits of continuous integration and delivery for process optimization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to process optimization. This involves understanding the potential impact of changes and designing validation strategies that effectively mitigate those risks. The goal is to create a continuous feedback loop where quality and security are built into the process, not added as an afterthought. This requires a deep understanding of the network architecture, the services being deployed, and the potential failure modes. When faced with pressure for rapid deployment, the decision-making process should involve assessing the trade-offs between speed and risk, and advocating for the integration of automated validation to maintain both agility and reliability. This proactive and integrated approach is the hallmark of mature network engineering and service architecture design. Question 13. Compliance review shows that the proposed network service architecture redesign for a multinational financial institution, intended to significantly improve data processing speeds, has not explicitly incorporated a review of data residency and cross-border data transfer regulations applicable to all operating regions. Which of the following approaches best addresses this oversight to ensure regulatory adherence? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of all relevant data residency and cross-border data transfer regulations for each operating region, and then design the network service architecture to strictly comply with these requirements, potentially involving regional data segregation or specific data handling protocols. Option B. Focus the redesign solely on technical performance and delegate the responsibility for regulatory compliance to the legal department without direct architectural input. Option C. Proceed with the redesign based on the highest performance benchmarks, assuming that compliance will be addressed through post-implementation audits and subsequent adjustments. Option D. Implement the redesign using common industry best practices for data handling, with the understanding that these practices are generally accepted and will likely satisfy most regulatory requirements. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of all relevant data residency and cross-border data transfer regulations for each operating region, and then design the network service architecture to strictly comply with these requirements, potentially involving regional data segregation or specific data handling protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between optimizing network service architecture for performance and adhering to strict regulatory compliance requirements, particularly concerning data privacy and security. The need to balance these often competing demands requires a nuanced understanding of both technical capabilities and legal obligations. Careful judgment is essential to ensure that any process optimization does not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate established regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the existing regulatory framework before implementing any changes. This proactive stance ensures that optimization efforts are designed within legal boundaries, minimizing the risk of noncompliance. By engaging with legal and compliance teams, the architect gains clarity on data handling, retention, and security mandates, which are critical for designing a network service architecture that is both efficient and legally sound. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive information and uphold regulatory standards. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical performance metrics without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the legal framework governing data processing and network operations. Such an approach risks violating data privacy laws by potentially exposing sensitive data or mishandling it in ways that are not permitted. For instance, implementing a new caching mechanism without assessing its impact on data residency requirements could lead to a breach of data sovereignty regulations. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing optimizations based on industry best practices without a specific regulatory review is also flawed. While industry best practices are valuable, they are not a substitute for understanding the specific legal landscape. A practice that is common in one jurisdiction might be illegal or heavily regulated in another. This oversight can lead to unintentional noncompliance, as the architect assumes a universal standard that does not exist. The ethical failure here is the abdication of responsibility to ensure adherence to applicable laws. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured, risk-based approach. First, identify all applicable regulatory frameworks and guidelines relevant to the network service architecture and the data it handles. Second, conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of any proposed architectural changes against these regulations. Third, consult with legal and compliance experts to validate the proposed design and identify potential risks. Fourth, prioritize compliance and security alongside performance and efficiency, recognizing that a non-compliant architecture, however performant, is ultimately unsustainable and carries significant legal and reputational risks. Question 14. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of service degradation due to inefficient ticket resolution workflows. A proposed optimization involves streamlining the ticket escalation process by removing a mandatory review step for certain types of incidents. What is the most professionally sound approach to address this risk? Option A. Focus on increasing the number of support staff to handle the ticket volume, as this directly addresses the perceived bottleneck without altering the existing, albeit inefficient, workflow. Option B. Rely on the experience of senior support staff to identify and implement the most obvious inefficiencies in the escalation process without formal documentation, as their expertise is invaluable. Option C. Implement the proposed streamlining immediately to reduce resolution times, as the risk matrix indicates a moderate likelihood of degradation, suggesting the current process is already problematic. Option D. Conduct a detailed analysis of the current ticket resolution workflow, including data on resolution times, escalation paths, and root causes of delays, before proposing any changes, and then pilot any revised process. Correct answer is C. Implement the proposed streamlining immediately to reduce resolution times, as the risk matrix indicates a moderate likelihood of degradation, suggesting the current process is already problematic. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for network service availability with the long-term implications of process optimization, all within the context of regulatory compliance. The pressure to demonstrate quick wins can often lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly efficient in the short term, may violate established operational procedures or introduce new risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any optimization efforts do not compromise the integrity, security, or compliance of the network services. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, data-driven methodology for process optimization. By conducting a thorough analysis of current processes, identifying bottlenecks through objective metrics, and then implementing changes with pilot testing and continuous monitoring, it ensures that optimizations are effective, sustainable, and compliant. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, which are implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory frameworks governing network service providers. Such a methodical approach minimizes the risk of unintended consequences, ensures that changes are validated before full deployment, and provides a clear audit trail for compliance purposes. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on perceived inefficiencies without a formal analysis risks overlooking critical dependencies or regulatory requirements. This could lead to the implementation of changes that, while appearing to optimize a specific step, inadvertently create new vulnerabilities or violate service-level agreements, SLAs, mandated by regulatory bodies. For instance, bypassing change control procedures to expedite a fix might introduce instability, leading to service disruptions that fall outside acceptable parameters defined by regulators. Another incorrect approach might involve adopting a solution based on anecdotal evidence or vendor claims without independent validation. This is professionally unacceptable, as it relies on subjective information rather than objective data, increasing the likelihood of implementing a suboptimal or even detrimental change. Such a practice fails to uphold the due diligence expected of network architects and can lead to noncompliance with regulations that mandate robust design and implementation practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape and its implications for network operations. This involves identifying all applicable laws, regulations, and industry best practices. Next, they should define clear objectives for any process optimization initiative, ensuring these objectives are measurable and aligned with both business goals and regulatory mandates. A critical step is to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, identifying potential impacts of proposed changes on service availability, security, and compliance. Finally, the decision-making process should involve iterative testing, validation, and continuous monitoring, with a strong emphasis on documentation and auditability to demonstrate adherence to all relevant frameworks. Question 15. Governance review demonstrates that the current network service provisioning process is experiencing significant delays and a high rate of manual intervention, impacting customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings to optimize the process? Option A. Focus on reducing the number of personnel involved in the provisioning process to cut costs, without a detailed analysis of the impact on workflow efficiency. Option B. Immediately invest in the latest network virtualization technologies to streamline service delivery, assuming that advanced technology will inherently resolve existing process issues. Option C. Rely on the experience of senior engineers to manually reconfigure the provisioning steps based on their intuition and past project successes. Option D. Implement a phased automation strategy for repetitive tasks, coupled with a data-driven analysis of key performance indicators, KPI, to identify and address bottlenecks in the provisioning workflow. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased automation strategy for repetitive tasks, coupled with a data-driven analysis of key performance indicators, KPI, to identify and address bottlenecks in the provisioning workflow. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid network service deployment and the need for robust, auditable process optimization. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass established governance and optimization procedures, potentially introducing inefficiencies, security vulnerabilities, or noncompliance with internal policies and external regulations. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with thoroughness. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the findings of the governance review by implementing a structured, data-driven methodology for process improvement. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and operational excellence, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by industry best practices and regulatory frameworks that emphasize efficiency, reliability, and accountability in network service delivery. By focusing on identifying bottlenecks and implementing targeted solutions, this approach ensures that optimization efforts are effective and sustainable, leading to improved service quality and reduced operational costs. This proactive stance also demonstrates a commitment to responsible network architecture design and management. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a thorough understanding of the underlying processes risks creating new inefficiencies or overlooking critical dependencies. This could lead to a failure to meet service level agreements (SLAs) or introduce compliance issues if the cost-cutting measures inadvertently violate regulatory requirements for service availability or data integrity. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the adoption of new technologies without a clear optimization strategy can lead to increased complexity and operational overhead. This can hinder, rather than help, process optimization, as the new technologies may not be integrated effectively or may introduce unforeseen challenges that require further, unplanned optimization efforts. This approach also risks non-compliance if the new technologies are not deployed in a manner that adheres to existing security and operational standards. A further incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or individual opinions for process changes lacks the rigor and objectivity necessary for effective optimization. This can lead to suboptimal solutions that do not address the root causes of inefficiencies and may even exacerbate existing problems. Such an approach fails to provide the auditable trail and data-backed justification required by governance frameworks and can be seen as a failure to adhere to professional standards of evidence-based decision-making. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the current state, informed by data and governance findings. This should be followed by a systematic analysis of potential optimization strategies, evaluating each against defined objectives, potential risks, and alignment with regulatory and policy requirements. The chosen strategy should be implemented iteratively, with continuous monitoring and feedback loops to ensure its effectiveness and to allow for further adjustments. This approach fosters a culture of accountability and continuous improvement, ensuring that network service architectures are not only functional but also efficient, reliable, and compliant. Question 16. The performance metrics show a consistent bottleneck in the provisioning workflow for new network services, leading to extended deployment times. To address this, a proposal suggests streamlining the approval process by removing one of the mandatory sign-off stages and automating the data validation checks. What is the most professional and responsible approach to implementing this proposed optimization? Option A. Document the proposed changes and wait for a formal audit to confirm their necessity and impact before any implementation. Option B. Implement the proposed changes immediately to realize the efficiency gains and monitor the impact on service delivery and security. Option C. Conduct a pilot deployment of the streamlined process in a non-production environment with comprehensive testing and a defined rollback plan before considering a production rollout. Option D. Proceed with the changes in production, assuming the automation will inherently improve security and efficiency and address any issues that arise reactively. The correct answer is B. Implement the proposed changes immediately to realize the efficiency gains and monitor the impact on service delivery and security. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network architecture design, optimizing process efficiency without compromising service quality or introducing security vulnerabilities. The professional challenge lies in balancing competing demand, speed of deployment, resource utilization, and adherence to established operational procedures and potential regulatory compliance. Misjudging the impact of process changes can lead to increased operational overhead, security risks, or even service disruptions, all of which have significant business and potentially legal ramifications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, controlled implementation of process changes with robust monitoring and rollback capabilities. This aligns with best practices in IT service management and network operations, emphasizing risk mitigation and continuous improvement. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to maintaining service integrity and security. It allows for verification that the optimized processes do not inadvertently violate any data handling, privacy, or security regulations that might be applicable to the network services being designed. This methodical approach ensures that any deviations from baseline performance are understood and addressed before they impact end users or compliance status. Incorrect approaches analysis, implementing process changes without thorough testing, and a defined rollback strategy is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for potential service disruptions, which could lead to breaches of service-level agreements (SLAs) and potential contractual liabilities. Furthermore, it increases the risk of introducing unintended security vulnerabilities, which could violate data protection regulations e.g. GDPR if applicable, though not specified here. The principle applies universally to data security. Hasty deployment without adequate validation can also lead to non-compliance with internal operational policies and industry best practices, potentially exposing the organization to reputational damage and financial penalties. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization by first conducting a thorough impact assessment. This includes identifying potential risks, defining success criteria, and planning for contingencies. Pilot deployment or staged rollout is crucial to validate the effectiveness of the changes in a controlled environment. Establishing clear monitoring mechanisms and a well-documented rollback plan are essential safeguards. This systematic approach ensures that optimizations are beneficial, sustainable, and compliant with all relevant standards and regulations, fostering trust and reliability in the design network services. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that a critical network service is experiencing intermittent performance degradation, impacting user experience and potentially violating service-level agreements. The design team is tasked with optimizing the underlying processes to improve reliability and efficiency. Which of the following approaches is most aligned with best professional practices for process optimization in a regulated environment? Option A. Prioritize the adoption of the latest network hardware, assuming that newer equipment will inherently resolve underlying process inefficiencies. Option B. Conduct a thorough analysis of existing processes, establish baseline performance metrics, and iteratively introduce and test process improvements, measuring their impact against the baseline. Option C. Implement a new, cutting-edge automation solution immediately to streamline operations, based on vendor claims of enhanced efficiency. Option D. Rely on the subjective feedback of senior engineers who have extensive experience, and implement changes based on their intuition about what needs to be optimized. The correct answer is C. Implement a new, cutting-edge automation solution immediately to streamline operations, based on vendor claims of enhanced efficiency. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in network architecture design, balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative of robust, compliant, and efficient operational processes. In the context of designing Cisco network service architectures, particularly concerning process optimization, the challenge lies in identifying and implementing improvements that yield tangible benefits without introducing undue risk or violating established regulatory frameworks. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of both technical network capabilities and the operational lifecycle, including how changes impact service delivery, security, and compliance. Careful judgment is required to prioritize optimization efforts that align with business objectives and regulatory mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on a systematic, data-driven methodology for process optimization. By establishing clear baseline metrics and iteratively testing changes against these benchmarks, it ensures that optimizations are measurable, repeatable, and demonstrably effective. This aligns with principles of continuous improvement and operational excellence, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by industry best practices and regulatory guidelines that emphasize efficiency, reliability, and accountability in service delivery. This methodical approach minimizes disruption, reduces the likelihood of introducing new errors, and provides a clear audit trail for any process changes, which is crucial for compliance and risk management. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or the adoption of the latest technology without proper validation, poses significant regulatory and ethical failures. It risks introducing inefficiencies, security vulnerabilities, or noncompliance with service-level agreements, SLAs, or data handling regulations. For instance, implementing a new automation tool without understanding its impact on existing security protocols could lead to a breach, violating data protection laws. Similarly, optimizing a process based on assumptions rather than data can lead to wasted resources and a failure to achieve desired outcomes, potentially breaching contractual obligations with clients or stakeholders. Another incorrect approach might involve prioritizing speed of implementation over thorough testing and validation. This can lead to the deployment of flawed processes that negatively impact service availability or data integrity, potentially violating service-level agreements and leading to reputational damage and financial penalties. Ethically, it represents a failure to exercise due diligence and a lack of commitment to delivering reliable and secure services. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of current processes and their performance metrics. This involves defining objectives for optimization, identifying key performance indicators, KPI, and establishing a baseline. Subsequently, potential optimization strategies should be evaluated based on their potential impact, feasibility, cost, and alignment with regulatory requirements. Pilot testing and phased rollouts are crucial to validate effectiveness and mitigate risks before full implementation. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure that optimizations remain effective and to identify further areas for improvement. This iterative and evidence-based approach fosters a culture of accountability and ensures that network service architectures are not only technically sound, but also operationally efficient and compliant. Question 18. Quality control measures reveal that a critical customer-facing application is experiencing intermittent periods of slow response times and occasional timeouts. The network architecture supporting this application is complex, involving multiple data centers, a WAN, and cloud-based services. The operations team has noted that these issues began shortly after a planned network upgrade in one of the data centers. What is the most effective and professional approach to diagnose and resolve this performance degradation? Option A. Immediately revert the recent network upgrade in the affected data center, as it is the most likely cause. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive network performance analysis, correlating real-time and historical monitoring data with traffic patterns and the timing of the recent network upgrade to identify specific bottlenecks or misconfigurations. Option C. Dispatch a hardware specialist to replace all network devices in the affected data center, assuming a hardware failure. Option D. Focus solely on addressing user complaints by adjusting application-level settings until the network team can investigate further. Correct answer is A. Immediately revert the recent network upgrade in the affected data center, as it is the most likely cause. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in network architecture design where a critical service experiences intermittent performance degradation. The difficulty lies in accurately diagnosing the root cause without disrupting other essential services or incurring significant downtime. The pressure to restore service quickly, coupled with the complexity of modern network infrastructures, necessitates a structured and evidence-based approach to problem resolution. Misdiagnosis can lead to wasted resources, prolonged outages, and potential reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic, data-driven investigation. By leveraging network monitoring tools to collect baseline performance metrics and then analyzing deviations during the incident, engineers can identify specific areas of concern. Correlating these deviations with recent configuration changes or known traffic patterns provides crucial context. This methodical process aligns with best practices in IT service management, such as those outlined in ITIL frameworks, which promote incident management based on accurate data and root cause analysis. This approach minimizes the risk of introducing further instability by avoiding hasty, unverified changes. It also ensures that any proposed solution is directly tied to observed symptoms, increasing the likelihood of a permanent fix and preventing recurrence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately reverting the most recent configuration change without sufficient analysis. This is problematic because the recent change might not be the actual cause, and reverting it could disrupt other functionalities or fail to address the underlying issue, leading to continued performance problems. Ethically, this approach bypasses due diligence and relies on assumption rather than evidence, which is unprofessional. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on hardware replacement based on a hunch. This is inefficient and costly, as it assumes a hardware failure without concrete evidence. It ignores the possibility of software, configuration, or traffic-related issues, which are often more prevalent causes of performance degradation. This approach lacks a structured diagnostic process and can lead to unnecessary expenditure and continued service disruption if the hardware is not the root cause. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize immediate user complaints over systematic data collection. While user feedback is important, acting solely on anecdotal evidence without verifying it with objective performance data can lead to misdirected efforts. This can result in chasing phantom issues or implementing solutions that do not address the actual technical problem, ultimately failing to resolve the service degradation effectively and professionally. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response and problem management framework. This involves clear steps for detection, logging, initial diagnosis, escalation, investigation, resolution, and closure. The decision-making process should be guided by data, evidence, and a thorough understanding of the network architecture and its dependencies. When faced with performance issues, the priority is to gather objective data, analyze it systematically, form hypotheses, test them methodically, and implement solutions based on validated findings. This ensures efficient resource allocation, minimizes downtime, and maintains service integrity. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that a critical customer-facing e-commerce application is experiencing intermittent but significant performance degradation, leading to increased cart abandonment rates. The network architecture team has been tasked with identifying the root cause and proposing a solution. The application owners have provided feedback that the issue seems to occur during peak traffic hours, but they are unsure of specific network requirements beyond general connectivity. The current network infrastructure is a mix of Cisco Catalyst switches and routers, with a WAN link connecting to a cloud-hosted application backend. Which of the following approaches best represents a professional and effective strategy for addressing this network performance issue? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive network performance analysis, correlating application-level metrics with detailed network telemetry, packet loss, latency, jitter, bandwidth utilization across all relevant network layers. Simultaneously, engage with application owners to understand specific application traffic patterns, latency sensitivities, and business impact to inform the network design. Option B. Immediately propose an upgrade to the core network switches and the WAN link, citing the general increase in application traffic as the primary driver for potential bottlenecks, without detailed analysis of current performance or application-specific needs. Option C. Focus solely on optimizing the routing configurations on the existing network devices, assuming that inefficient routing paths are the most probable cause of the performance degradation, and deferring detailed application traffic analysis. Option D. Recommend implementing a quality of service (QoS) policy that prioritizes all application traffic based on general business importance, without first gathering specific application traffic profiles or validating the impact of such a policy on other network services. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive network performance analysis, correlating application-level metrics with detailed network telemetry, packet loss, latency, jitter, bandwidth utilization across all relevant network layers. Simultaneously, engage with application owners to understand specific application traffic patterns, latency sensitivities, and business impact to inform the network design. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network architecture design, where a critical business application's performance is degrading, impacting user productivity and potentially revenue. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause within a complex, multi-layered network infrastructure, and proposing a solution that balances technical efficacy with business needs and budgetary constraints. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly, coupled with the need to justify any proposed changes to stakeholders with varying technical understanding, makes this a professionally demanding situation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that prioritizes understanding the application's specific network requirements, and then correlating observed performance issues with network behavior. This aligns with best professional practices in network design and troubleshooting, emphasizing a holistic view that integrates application performance with underlying network infrastructure. By engaging with the application owners and end users, the architect gains crucial context about the application's criticality, traffic patterns, and acceptable latency thresholds. Analyzing network telemetry, e.g., packet loss, latency, jitter, bandwidth utilization, at various layers, physical, data link, network, transport, application, provides objective evidence to pinpoint the bottleneck. Proposing a solution that directly addresses the identified network deficiency, with clear justification tied to improved application performance and business outcomes, demonstrates a professional and responsible design process. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the business's operational integrity and user experience. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately assuming a hardware upgrade is the solution without thorough investigation. This is professionally unsound because it bypasses the critical diagnostic phase, potentially leading to unnecessary expenditure on hardware that doesn't address the actual problem. It demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and a failure to adhere to a structured problem-solving methodology. Ethically, it risks wasting company resources and failing to deliver a timely resolution. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on network device configurations without considering the application's specific needs or traffic patterns. While configuration issues can cause problems, a myopic focus can lead to misdiagnosis. For instance, optimizing routing for general traffic might negatively impact a latency-sensitive application. This approach lacks the stakeholder perspective and the necessary application-aware design principles. It is professionally deficient as it fails to consider the end-to-end service delivery. A third incorrect approach is to recommend a solution based on anecdotal evidence or the latest industry trend, without validating it against the specific network environment and application requirements. This demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and a failure to apply engineering principles. It is professionally irresponsible as it could introduce new problems or fail to solve the existing one, potentially impacting business operations and user trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, evidence-based approach to network design and problem-solving. This involves 1. Understanding the business context. Clearly define the business impact of the performance issue and the criticality of the affected application. 2. Stakeholder engagement. Collaborate with application owners, end users, and IT operations to gather requirements and understand user experience. 3. Data collection and analysis. Employ network monitoring tools and techniques to collect relevant performance metrics across all network layers. 4. Root cause analysis. Systematically analyze the collected data to identify the underlying cause of the performance degradation. 5. Solution design and justification. Propose a solution that directly addresses the root cause, is cost-effective, and aligns with business objectives. Clearly articulate the expected benefits and potential risks. 6. Implementation and validation. Plan and execute the implementation, followed by thorough testing and validation to confirm the issue is resolved and performance is improved. 7. Continuous monitoring. Establish ongoing monitoring to ensure sustained performance and proactively identify future issues. Question 20. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a critical network service outage impacting customer financial transactions due to an aging, unsupported routing infrastructure. Which of the following design approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to industry best practices for service resilience and regulatory compliance? Option A. Continue to apply security patches and minor configuration adjustments to the existing routing infrastructure while developing manual workarounds for potential service interruptions. Option B. Implement a phased upgrade plan for the routing infrastructure, prioritizing critical components and ensuring minimal disruption to ongoing financial transactions, coupled with comprehensive testing and validation. Option C. Initiate an immediate, large-scale replacement of the entire routing infrastructure with the latest technology, accepting potential short-term service disruptions and significant capital expenditure. Option D. Focus solely on enhancing monitoring and alerting capabilities for the current infrastructure, deferring any hardware or software upgrades until a critical failure occurs. Correct answer is B. Implement a phased upgrade plan for the routing infrastructure, prioritizing critical components and ensuring minimal disruption to ongoing financial transactions, coupled with comprehensive testing and validation. Explanation: the risk matrix shows a high likelihood of a critical network service outage impacting customer financial transactions due to an aging, unsupported routing infrastructure. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the immediate cost savings of maintaining the current infrastructure against the significant financial and reputational risks of a service disruption. The pressure to defer capital expenditure can be substantial, but the potential consequences of inaction, especially in a regulated financial services environment, are severe. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with robust risk management and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes proactive risk mitigation and adherence to regulatory mandates for service availability and data integrity. By recommending a phased upgrade plan that addresses the identified vulnerabilities, the architect demonstrates a commitment to business continuity and customer trust. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT governance, which emphasize foresight and the implementation of solutions that safeguard critical operations. In a regulated industry, such as financial services, demonstrating due diligence in managing technological risks is not just good practice, but often a legal and ethical imperative. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on patching the existing infrastructure without a clear end-of-life strategy fails to address the root cause of the risk. This represents a regulatory failure by not adequately mitigating a known, high-impact risk, potentially violating service-level agreements and industry-specific regulations that mandate resilient infrastructure. Ethically, it prioritizes short-term cost over long-term stability and customer protection. Another incorrect approach that proposes an immediate, large-scale rip-and-replace without a detailed migration plan and business impact assessment is also professionally unsound. While it addresses the risk, it introduces a new set of high risks related to implementation complexity, potential service disruption during the transition, and significant, unbudgeted capital expenditure. This could lead to regulatory scrutiny for failing to manage project risks effectively, and for potentially causing undue disruption to essential services. A third incorrect approach that suggests accepting the risk and relying on manual workarounds during potential outages is a clear abdication of professional responsibility and a significant regulatory failure. This approach ignores the high likelihood of an outage and the critical nature of the services, directly contravening regulations that require robust systems and contingency planning for financial transaction processing. It is ethically indefensible as it places customers and the organization at unacceptable risk. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment, clear communication of findings to stakeholders, and the development of a range of viable solutions with associated costs, benefits, and risks. This includes understanding the specific regulatory landscape, the business impact of potential failures, and the organization's risk appetite. The architect must then present a well-reasoned recommendation, supported by technical and business justifications, enabling informed decision-making by leadership.